All right, let me start.
You wanted to talk about Ayanamshas a little bit.
Ayanamshas, all right. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Ernst Wilhelm. Today, we're going to be talking about a few different topics, and we're going to start with Ayanamshas, because there's a lot of questions about why, when you go to different astrologers, are different dasha systems different? Why do charts show up differently? Why are planets in different situations? Why are nakshatras different, which we'll get into in other topics. So Ernst's software, Kala, has a lot of different potential settings for Ayanamshas. And Ernst, how many Ayanamshas would you say you've got programmed in there? Is it like 29 or 30?
I didn't even count them.
Seems like there's a lot.
There's a lot. There's easily 30.
Yeah.
And the very fact that there's so many damn Ayanamshas, okay, is really revealing to some of the problems we have in astrology. If we really knew what we were doing in a scientific sense with astrology, we wouldn't have so many Ayanamshas. You know, the very fact that there is so many just shows how much further we have to go to really perfect astrology as a science, right, and how much it's done based on feel and intuition. Now, the reason we have so many with this new version of Kala is because the Swiss ephemeris, which is the calculation engine we use to calculate the planets, has a lot of Ayanamshas with it. And they did an update. They added a lot of Ayanamshas. So we just added them all. And because we feel people who are into researching things should have access to different Ayanamshas.
Right.
Now, the reason that there is so many, though, there's a couple of reasons. The primary reason is that when you go back to the old astronomical books from India, they'll have a star position. And they'll say this star is at this portion of the nakshatra. Right. So they'll say Chitra star is in the middle of Chitra nakshatra. And Chitra star is known as Spica in the West. And that star is what a lot of astrologers use to calculate their Ayanamsha out with. Right. But the very same books will say that Revati star is 10 minutes from the end of Revati nakshatra. So that would make those two stars, the Chitra star and the Revati star, 10 minutes less than 180 degrees apart. So it'd be 179 degrees and 50 minutes apart. So if you calculate an Ayanamsha for both of those stars and put them in those positions, you should have the same Ayanamsha, right? But in reality, if you say, okay, look, let me look in the sky where Spica is or Chitra is, and say, I'm going to put that star in the middle of Chitra, and I calculate an Ayanamsha. That's called Chitra Paksha Ayanamsha, or commonly known as Lahiri Ayanamsha. If you do that, and then you go over to Revati and you say, okay, I'm going to see where Revati actually is, and I'm going to start making Ayanamsha for that. They should be the same according to the astronomical books, but they're not. They're over 3 degrees different.
Right.
The reason that is because the old star catalogs were so off that the stars were only accurate within 4 degrees of placement.
So it's not due to like stellar drift or the stars actually moving?
No,
okay.
No, nothing like that. The stellar drift isn't fast enough for that to happen.
Okay.
Okay, then, but these books will give all 27 nakshatras, right? And another astrologer will say, actually, I want to use the scorpion's tail and make the Mula star the beginning of Sagittarius. Okay, the beginning of Mula nakshatra. And they'll make an Ayanamsha for that. And that one won't fit relevant to the other stars because it's also only off within 4 degrees. So any astrologer, and it can take any nakshatra star from the old books and say, I'm going to use this star to make an Ayanamsha, and end up with 27 different Ayanamshas, one for every star, because none of the stars are accurately enough portrayed in these old books for them to line up the way they should.
Right.
So it's really a foolish, I don't even say foolish, it's an idiotic thing in my opinion, to take any of those star positions according to one of these old books and say, I'm going to use this star to create an Ayanamsha.
Mm-hmm.
The old school did that. The majority of old school astrologers, previous to the 1900s, used Revati as the prime star.
Okay.
But then when the government of India got together in the 50s, the problem they were having is that, the railroad was big and everything had to run according to schedule and holidays had to be the same. Well, one village would be using an Ayanamsha based on one star, and another village would be using an Ayanamsha based on another star, and they would want to have the day off on a different day. And it wouldn't work. So the government said, no, we need to use the same thing everywhere. We don't care what it is, it just has to be the same. Right. And they got together a few astronomers and they said, work it out, just agree, and we're going to pass it into law. And they came up with, Lahiri was one of the members of that congregation, and they decided we'll use Chitra star because it's a bright star, it's close to the ecliptic, and it's bright. Revati is closer to the ecliptic, but it's dim. So they went with Chitra, very easy to see star.
Right.
And the government said, okay, we'll use this star to make the Ayanamsha, and we'll all have our holidays on the same days, and it'll all be good. And they wrote into law. At that point, Lahiri Ayanamsha became the common Ayanamsha. What happened, though, is that they based Ayanamsha on a misunderstanding of the Surya Siddhanta. Mm. In the Surya Siddhanta, when they give the positions of the stars, they give them in what's called a Dhruva coordinate.
Right.
Okay, now imagine when we calculate planets, they're going around the ecliptic, but they're not on the ecliptic, right? Mm-hmm. The sun is on the ecliptic. The path of the sun is the ecliptic.
Right.
But the planets travel north or south of the ecliptic by up to about 9 degrees. So how do we know where they're at on the ecliptic if they're not on it? What we do is we draw a line perpendicular from the ecliptic to the planet, right?
You're right.
And we say, okay, we take a line that's 90-degree angle from the ecliptic and we draw it to the planet. And where that line intersects the ecliptic, that's the planetary position.
Okay.
And that's called the ecliptic coordinates. Now, the astronomical books don't give the stars in ecliptic coordinates.
Okay.
The reason they don't is because the stars don't travel along the ecliptic. Right? The stars don't travel along the ecliptic.
Right.
Only the planets do, right?
Right. Yeah.
So these guys weren't dumb. They knew that. Mm-hmm. The modern astrologers were dumb and thought, and that's how they plotted the stars. So back in the 50s when they made the Lahiri Ayanamsha, they calculated it out so that the positions given in the Surya Siddhanta of Chitra star, they made that a 90-degree intersection to the ecliptic. And they said, where this star intersects the ecliptic at a 90-degree angle, that's the beginning of, or the middle of Chitra Nakshatra, the beginning of Libra. Okay. But the Surya Siddhanta didn't plot them that way. The Surya Siddhanta plotted them along what they call Dhruva coordinates. So Dhruva means fixed, and it relates to the North Pole. So if you take a globe, like say you just get a globe, mm-hmm. and the globe has the North Pole and it revolves around the North Pole, right? And South Poles. And if you spin the globe, the stars, imagine the stars are on the outside of the globe, right? Right. And now you spin the globe inside the stars, right? The stars travel along the equator, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the old books, they say the stars travel east to west. The planets travel east to west, but also north and south. Right. Because the ecliptic is at an angle to the equator. But the stars only seem to revolve around Earth because the Earth is revolving on its axis, right? Right. So as the Earth revolves around its axis, the stars revolve around Earth. Mm-hmm. And so they measured the stars along Dhruva coordinates, which basically means instead of drawing a line to the ecliptic that's perpendicular to the ecliptic or mm-hmm. hitting the ecliptic at 90 degrees, it draws a line through the North Pole to the north and south pole. So just on your globe, now you have those north-south lines.
Right.
Those north-south lines on the globe, it finds where one of those lines, a star in one of those lines, intersects the ecliptic. And that's an angle. So if we have the ecliptic like this, and we have a star here. Okay, you want to see that too? Okay, I'm going to try to do it with my hands.
Okay, well, let me stop sharing. We'll come back to that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we need to. So here's the ecliptic, right? And it's kind of the ecliptic. The Earth is here. The planets are moving up and down the ecliptic at an angle to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a star right here where my finger is, we're going to measure that star by going 90 degrees to the ecliptic.
Mm-hmm.
That's ecliptic longitude.
Ecliptic longitude.
But the Surya Siddhanta doesn't do that. It measures it this way, north and south, straight. So the Surya,
north and south pole, right?
Yeah, north along the pole.
Yeah.
So the Surya Siddhanta says Chitra is at 0, is in the middle of Chitra, is at 0 Libra, measured this way.
Mm-hmm.
Then the astronomers measured it this way. And now we have this error of this margin of error of about 27 minutes of arc.
Okay, that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's huge.
Yeah.
So several years later, Lahiri finally opened up Surya Siddhanta and gave it another read-through or something and realized that he had made a mistake in his Ayanamsha. And he said the Ayanamsha needed to be corrected by about ½ a degree.
Okay.
Now the thing is, based on the precession, that will change though. So right now it's about 27 minutes.
Right.
At some point in the precessional cycle of 25,600 years, there'll be no error.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, the error will be a little bit over 1 degree.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something they didn't even factor into it. So one of the new Ayanamshas they have is an updated, modified Chitra type Ayanamsha. So,
do you mind if I share the Kala screen where it shows these things?
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share the screen because I think it's important for people to see also that the difference that this makes in a dasha cycle.
Oh yeah, it'll make a huge difference.
Yeah, so if we look here, and we've got the Rahu dasha starting, let's say July 2014, and that's for the true Revati. So true Revati, is this the one that would have been used previous to the Lahiri, or is there another one of these for that?
Let's see. Yes, it would have been like that.
Okay, so true Revati, which would be
true Revati, and the Usasashi right below it.
Yep.
Was a Revati based.
Okay.
And the Sasanian is a Revati based too.
Okay.
But the Usasashi is like the most formal Revati based Ayanamsha. And then the true Revati is a bit of an improvement over that.
Well, let's look at this one first to see what the dasha is going to look like.
Sure.
So with the Ushashashi, we have, again, July 2014 for a Rahu dasha starting with this particular.
July 27th, yeah.
And then
what you can do real quick, before you go there,
okay,
right-click on your screen and pull up the Kala Jataka from the right, on the right-hand side under the pop-ups, yeah?
Gotcha.
And on the bottom of that, you can see then the Ayanamsha, 2024-16.
2024-16. Got it.
Okay, so then for today.
Okay.
And so then when you change it.
I'm just going to change it to Lahiri to show what that difference makes.
Yeah.
Just for example. So to Lahiri. Okay. Let's get this off. So the Rahu Dasha then moves from 2014 July to August 2019. So that's a 4-year difference just for example.
It's like totally different timing. And you can see because it's about a 3-degree difference in Ayanamsha.
Okay.
And
so,
those two schools, the Revati school and the Chitra school, are the 2 primary divisions used in India. So there's a lot of Ayanamshas that are in the Revati ballpark, and then there's a lot of Ayanamshas in the Chitra ballpark, like KP Ayanamsha is in the Chitra ballpark, and so on.
Right. Okay. So basically what we have is a situation where previous to, say, 1950s or thereabouts, most people were using a Revati-based nakshatra, or Revati-based Ayanamsha.
Yes.
And then after the 50s, we make a switch to Lahiri.
Lahiri really gained prominence, yeah.
Right. And now after this 50 years, everyone just assumes and really puts a lot of attention to Lahiri, but sort of negates these other nakshatras.
They neglect them, but not only that, they think Lahiri Ayanamsha is true, even though Lahiri himself doesn't even agree with that Ayanamsha, because he realized he'd made a mistake in the Surya Siddhanta, and that he didn't consider that they gave Dhruva coordinates.
Right.
An interesting thing is, A long time ago, I worked on the Ardra Galactic Plane Ayanamsha.
Right.
Okay? And that Ayanamsha, we basically take the galactic plane and put it through the middle of Mula and the beginning of Ardra.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about why later.
Yeah.
That Ayanamsha comes up to be what Lahiri would use today.
Oh, okay.
Correction. It validates the Lahiri Ayanamsha.
It does, because that puts Rahu Dasha in this example chart just starting within maybe 3-month difference.
Exactly. It's about 27.5 degrees different.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Than using the Lahiri.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about that more. Go to on the Ayanamshas, go to the true Chitra now.
True Chitra. Okay.
And see how much that creates.
Okay, so that takes us, it's very similar. It's putting us to August 2019.
It moves about 2 weeks only.
Yeah, so.
That's a little bit more accurate of improvement on the Lahiri.
Mm-hmm.
But these are very minor things, you know, when you get into the Lahiri ballpark, Chitra, KP, True Chitra, they're all in the same ballpark. Same with any Revati-based Ayanamsha.
Right.
Now, in my opinion, it's not a really intelligent thing to use a star to define the zodiac circle.
Right.
And
because they burn out and move, right?
They burn out, they move. For all we know, some of those stars may not even be there anymore. All that's happening is the light may still reach Earth for a few million light years, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Or several light years. But the fact is they move. They're not fixed stars. Relevant to the movements of the planets, they're fixed, but they're not fixed. Mm-hmm. Also, the whole precessional cycle and the influence on man's consciousness that the precessional cycle has in accordance with Sri Yukteswar's theories doesn't really make sense to base all this on a star. Mm-hmm. What it makes sense to base it on is the galactic center.
Right.
In our galaxy, the only fixed point of any circle is that's spinning is the middle of the circle, right? Mm-hmm. And for our galaxy, which is a circular spiral galaxy, the only fixed point is the galactic center, right, around which everything else revolves. So in my opinion, the only possibly accurate Ayanamsha is going to be an Ayanamsha. Any accurate sidereal-based Ayanamsha is going to be an Ayanamsha that is based on the galactic center.
So the Dhruva Galactic Center, middle of Mula, Galactic Center, middle of Mula, or Dhruva Galactic Center, middle of Mula. These are the ones.
Yeah, there's a couple options, and I'll talk about those. Okay? What it is in the old books, they tell you to calculate when the sun crosses the equinoxes and the solstices. Mm-hmm. When the sun crosses those points, you cast a chart, and you can predict the world events. They also say to pay attention when the sun enters Ardra Nakshatra. They don't say anything about any of the other nakshatras. They only say when the sun crosses Ardra Nakshatra is the day that happens is the Lord of the Clouds, mm-hmm, which in a society where the rain was the key ingredient to prosperity and life, the Lord of Clouds becomes the most important Lord of all, you know? And this comes from Vedic times when Indra, the Lord of the Clouds, was one of the primary invoked gods. Sadly, in these post-Vedic era of Hinduism, Indra is not considered as important as he was in the Vedic tradition. In the Vedic tradition, if you read the Rig Veda, you get Agni, Surya, Indra. These are the three fires. Agni is the fire in the earth, the sun is the fire in the heavens, and Indra is the fire in the atmosphere, in the air. And it's these three fires that we're most worshipped because these three fires allow life to flourish on earth, each in its own way. But as post-Vedic times, post-Rig Vedic Hinduism emerged, the importance of the deity shifted, and it became more like a guru thing, where the deities most worshipped were the prominent gurus, such as Krishna and Rama, the avatars incarnated on earth, rather than the avatars incarnations of God in nature, which Agni, Surya, and Indra were. So, but the fact that Lord of Clouds, you can see this is an important Lord, and it's found when the sun enters Ardra Nakshatra, not any other nakshatra, not Mula Nakshatra, not Revati Nakshatra, and you're like, why, when the sun enters Ardra, can that be important? The reason is because when the sun enters Ardra, it's 180 degrees opposite, so exactly opposite the middle of Mula.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if you line things up, you've got the sun in Ardra, the Earth, and the galactic center.
Mm-hmm.
And you can draw a line through all three of those.
So the Earth is closest to the galactic center there.
Closest to the galactic center at that point, which makes sense because that's the fixed creative point in our galaxy. It's what is called the Vishnu Nabi, the navel of Vishnu, where Brahma is manifested by Vishnu to create the entire universe. Not universe, but our entire galaxy, our universe, you know? And so this is the key point. So we're closest to Brahma every year, the Earth, when Earth is in the middle of Mula.
Mm-hmm.
Mula means the root, and it has to do with the commencement and beginning of things. And that's why the galactic center is there. Ardra, when the sun's in Ardra, that's when the Earth is closest to the galactic center, if we put the galactic center in the middle of Mula.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done is I've taken that and put the Earth in the middle of, put the galactic center in the middle of Mula.
Right.
And then calculate the Ayanamsha, the nakshatras and so on, Ayanamsha from that.
So the definition is coming from the position in reference to the galactic center, that being Mula, and then determining the nakshatras from that point onward.
Yes, the position of the galactic center is the middle of Mula.
Because that is the unchanging thing.
That's the fixed thing.
Right, okay.
Now, the problem with this is there's a problem. The problem is we have a galactic center, but we also have a galactic plane.
Mm-hmm.
Which one of those should we put in the middle of Mula? Both of them have a rationale. For instance, with the ascendant, with the ecliptic, we're always dealing with planes.
Right.
We're seeing where planes intersect planes. So should we consider where the galactic plane intersects, and make that the middle of Mula? Mm-hmm. Or should we consider the galactic center itself? So when I did sidereal astrology...
What? You don't do sidereal astrology anymore?
No, with the signs. When I used sidereal signs, up until 2007, I used the Ardra galactic plane Ayanamsha.
Okay.
Where I put the galactic plane intersecting Ardra on one end, the beginning of Ardra on one end, and the middle of Mula on the other end.
Okay.
And then that defined the Ayanamsha. And that is close to Lahiri. It's about 27 degrees, 26 and a half, I think exactly. I don't remember. I used to remember. But about 27 degrees different than Lahiri. So it'll make a slight difference in your charts and a slight difference in your Ayanamsha, and it works better. Sam Jeppe still uses that. Anyone who studied with me back then, who quit studying with me and never went tropical, still uses that Ayanamsha.
Okay. And one thing
Alan uses it.
One thing I do want to say is, for those of you who are watching, I know a lot of people think that when you're using Kala software that it's just doing, say, for example, tropical. Well, it can do sidereal. It can do any of these Ayanamshas that you want, right? I mean, it's
it has more options than anyone else.
Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up.
All right. So with and I've had the best when I did sidereal astrology, I by far had the best results using the Ardra galactic plane Ayanamsha. So that's where we take the galactic plane, we cut it across the middle of Mula and the beginning of Ardra, and calculate a chart. And it's about 27 degrees different than Lahiri.
Okay.
Anyone who's a Lahiri fan and wants to stick to sidereal, I really would highly advise. When I did sidereal, I by far had the best results with that Ayanamsha.
Okay.
But then I got into tropical. And after I got into tropical, I started developing some nakshatra-only techniques. At the same time, I was doing some really tricky mundane astrology predictions for this investor with respect to the market, the stock market and that kind of junk. And I wasn't really happy with the results that Ayanamsha was giving. So then I worked on it more. I said, okay, I'm going to try putting the galactic center in the middle of Mula.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I put the galactic center in the middle of Mula. With my nakshatra-only techniques, I started having what I thought was better results. So at that point, I switched to putting the galactic center in the middle of the moolah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's only two intelligent answers to an Ayanamsha. We either put the galactic center in the middle of moolah or the galactic plane.
Right.
None of the other ones make sense. Now here's the interesting thing though.
Uh-huh.
If I put the galactic plane in the middle of moolah, then I get a Chitra-centered Ayanamsha. An Ayanamsha that validates the Chitra Lahiri school, the KP school, and all the other people who've had Ayanamshas in that ballpark, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we put the galactic plane in the middle of moolah, not the galactic plane, sorry, the galactic center in the middle of moolah, then we get an Ayanamsha that's almost exactly the same as the Revati Ayanamsha.
Mm-hmm.
And so it validates all Revati school. So we're back to the square one of the two schools that have been dominant in India throughout all time, the Chitra and the Revati based.
But wouldn't it be similar? I mean, so if you're using the tropical zodiac and you're basing that zodiac off of the movement of the sun, right? Mm-hmm. Then wouldn't it make sense that you would treat the nakshatras with the middle of moolah as the galactic center in the same way that you treat the sun, meaning that's the thing that we're looking at, because we use the ecliptic, sure, which is the sun, but we're measuring the zodiac based on where the sun is, not the actual plane of the ecliptic, right?
Well, the sun is
Does that question make sense?
Sort of. Okay, so the sun, let me try to rephrase it so I understand it.
Okay.
So the sun is traveling around the earth, but it appears like the earth is traveling around the sun. Yeah. So from our point of view, the sun is the center.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. And where the sun, as the earth revolves around the sun, mm-hmm. where the earth's equator intersects the sun,
right,
defines the zodiac.
Mm-hmm. For the tropical zodiac, correct, yes.
Right, the solstice points.
Yeah.
So we're taking the plane of the earth, what we're doing is we're dealing with two planes. We're taking the plane of the earth revolving around the sun. That's the ecliptic plane, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're taking the plane of the surface of the earth revolving around the center of the earth, which is the equatorial plane.
Right, the equator. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, the equatorial plane. And where those two planes intersect, we get our solstice, our equinoxes.
Right.
Which define the tropical zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
So we're intersecting planes to planes.
Yeah, so then...
So you see, in everything we intersect planes to planes.
Right, I see.
The problem with the galactic plane is we've pinpointed where the galactic center is. Mm-hmm. But the galactic plane, where exactly is that? That's not as perfectly defined. In fact, I think in 2011, a Chinese astrologer made an improvement on the position of the galactic plane by a very, very slight amount. So it's not like we have that dialed in completely. And that we may only have that to about 4 minutes of arc accuracy.
Okay.
So you're dealing with a possible error when you're dealing with the galactic plane still, because astronomers still have not nailed that thing down. And the galactic plane is a very hard thing to define. How they're trying to, it's like there's so many different ways we could define it. If the way we would need to define it is we'd have to see the path of our solar system as it revolves around the galactic plane, where that intersects.
Right.
Where that plane is. Where is that plane?
Right.
Well, it only takes a few billion years for our solar system to travel around the galactic center. Mm-hmm. So in few more billion years, I'm sure we'll know exactly where the plane is. Okay.
Right. I see. That makes sense.
That's the plane we really need.
Right.
Any calculations, any attempts to calculate that plane, I don't think we can do it right yet.
Right.
There's also the problem is that the sun, like here's the galactic center. It's not like the sun just revolves around the galactic plane like this. It's not that type of thing. The sun goes around like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Around the galactic plane. Where each one of these loops is 25,000 or so years. And then as it loop-de-doops around the galactic plane, that's one theory that modern astrologers are developing. They're not even 100% sure. But they say it seems to oscillate back and forth towards the galactic center as it revolves.
Right.
So we don't know, astronomically, we don't know enough to definitively calculate the right galactic plane.
Mm-hmm.
So my attitude is, if we can't definitively calculate something accurately, even if it's right, we're not meant to use it yet. And that'll be the next step of making astrology a bit more of a better science.
Mm-hmm.
So I stick with what we can practically do today, which is putting the galactic center in the middle of Mula.
Gotcha. All right.
Anyone who's doing it, I recommend those are the only two ayanamsas worth trying. Nothing else even worth using. You know?
Okay.
Find one of those that you like. Everything else is garbage.
Right.
But we still put a lot of different ones in the software because a lot of Western astrologers, there are sidereal Western astrologers out there, and there's a lot of them. And as they get turned to Vedic astrology, they're going to want to use their sidereal, Ayanamsha. For most of them, that's the Fagan-Bradley Ayanamsha. But for other people, it might be one of these other Ayanamshas. So we just thought it doesn't hurt us to put all these in there.
Right.
But the only one I would ever play with anymore, and I played with them all at some point, were the two based on the galactic center.
Okay. So for those who have Kala, we'd be looking at Ardra Galactic Plane or the Galactic Center. Were those the two you were mentioning?
The two, let's see. The three on top.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Right.
There's one that says Dhruva Galactic Center Mula, with Wilhelm at the bottom there.
Right.
Fourth one at the top.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that is part of the Swiss ephemeris now. It's an option in the Swiss ephemeris where he basically took my Galactic Center Mula idea and programmed it so that any programmer can use it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so like if you bought the Swiss ephemeris and wanted to make astrology software, you have an option to include that Ayanamsha now.
Okay.
The three Ayanamshas on the top are the ones I recommend everyone uses. Those are the ones that we've calculated ourselves, that are only available in Kala, and they're the way that I think they should be.
Okay.
And there's a slight difference, though. So the Ardra Galactic Plane, we simply take the galactic plane and intersect it to the ecliptic and create an Ayanamsha, okay?
Okay.
The galactic center, middle of Mula, we take the galactic center and we intersect it to the ecliptic at a 90-degree along a 90-degree plane, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And define a zodiac and nakshatras for that. The Dhruva Galactic Center, we use Dhruva coordinates which again, so I'll show with my hands. Can you flip it away from there real quick?
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let's stop sharing. There you go.
So I'm going to just show it. So here's the ecliptic, the path of the sun around the Earth. And here's Earth, like about here on my wrist, okay? So here's your galactic center. Right here is the galactic center. We can plot the galactic center to the eclipse by a 90-degree arc or by a north-south arc to the poles. The galactic center, middle of Mula, goes 90 degrees. If you're going to use Ayanamsha for Rashis, do it this way.
Okay.
But if you're going to use it with tropical just for nakshatras, do it this way.
Okay.
Because this way you're calculating nakshatras along the rotation plane of the nakshatras, which is around the poles. Got it? Okay, not around the poles, but perpendicular to the poles. So you got to go perpendicular, and that'll give you a little difference. How much difference is it? It's only 4 minutes of arc.
Okay.
It's very slight amount.
And for those of you who want a little more advanced kind of image, I'm going to share this drawing just briefly.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell them about that drawing.
Okay, and you can pause the video to take a look at that. So let's show this here. Okay, and so this is the diagram that Ernst was doing with his arm. So again, if you want to think about that, then is there anything you'd want to say?
Point out to them what it is? You want to explain to them a bit?
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you should because you got the mouse.
Well, what we're looking at here, it's pretty straightforward, right? We've got the ecliptic, and this is the Earth, and then this is the North Pole. Okay.
Perfect.
So essentially, and this is, if I recall correctly from your description, this is the star that we were using for an example here, right?
That would be like Chitra star, basically.
Okay. And so then the line that's drawing at 90 degrees to the ecliptic, right? And then what we're really wanting to do, though, if I understand this diagram correctly, is that if we're using the North Pole to South Pole, then it's going to make a difference, because on one situation, we're going to have it say Nakshatra 13, for example.
Yep.
But on the other situation, it's going to be in Nakshatra 14, correct?
Exactly. And that's what happens with Lahiri. The position that Chitra is given in the old books is based on the north-south.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Lahiri Ayanamsha that is in common use today is based on the perpendicular to the ecliptic.
Right. So today would be this star drawing a line to the ecliptic.
Exactly. Where the way you find the Surya Siddhanta is the other way.
It would have been through this little part of the column here.
Just straight up to the ecliptic. You would just go straight up to the ecliptic, and that would be the end of it.
Okay, great. All right. So we'll go.
And it's about a 27-degree difference.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, right now, and it will change.
And so
people can study that spatial image of the center of our Earth outwards to the stars. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and stop that. And again, you can rewind the video.
This is a tough subject. Spherical astronomy is really hard to get your heads around. Mm-hmm. So if people listening to this are like, oh my God, I don't know what this means, just review it. When I started learning spherical astronomy, it was really painful, because you have to imagine yourself at the center of the Earth and looking outward into space, and what that whole sphere might look at in any direction you look, with all the different points and everything. And it's a real head twister in spatial thinking that we just don't. The only people who do that kind of thinking are astronomers.
Right.
So it's kind of a painful thing to break into, but I really encourage people to try to study spherical astronomy, get a vision of it, and even search online spherical astronomy, so you can understand, the whole basis of astrology is spherical astronomy. And it was only developed for astrologers,
Right.
And now no astrologers even know what it is. So it's a really important part of your studies.
I think it's a good point, the repetition, because I remember when I first read your article that had that image in it, I don't know how many times I kept going back to that saying, I think he's a little off.
No, it's hard to think that way. I remember studying those old, modern astronomy books, old astronomy books, reading over and over and over again until you can put yourself in the center of the Earth and looking outward, and then it starts making sense.
Right. And one quick thing I also want to show with Kala, let me share that screen again and get your input on this. So when you were talking about these Ayanamshas and Nakshatras and so on, you were saying when it comes to Nakshatras, you want to use the Dhruva coordinates. But when it comes to Rashis, you do not want to use the Dhruva coordinates. Is that correct?
Exactly. So what you can do is, if you want to use any Ayanamsha with sidereal Rashis, but you want to use Dhruva coordinates with it, you can check the nakshatra options over there and use the Dhruva equatorial longitude for the nakshatra.
Right.
That'll change it.
Okay, so Dhruva equatorial longitude for nakshatras.
Or actually, in that case, you'd want to use, if you're a siderealist, you'd want to use the Dhruva ecliptic longitude.
Okay.
Which is going to basically calculate the nakshatras the way they're portrayed in the classical texts, in the classical astronomy books, with that correction to Lahiri, basically.
All right, so for sidereal astrologers, those who prefer the sidereal zodiac, Dhruva ecliptic longitude, and then the more tropically based, the ones of that persuasion, use the Dhruva equatorial longitude, correct? Yeah. Okay, great. All right, well, good. Well, I think that that's going to give people enough to think about for a little while, unless there's
the most important thing is for people who are siderealists who have Kala, play around with some of those Ayanamshas on the upper left, and play around with some of your nakshatra calculations, and just see what fits, where you find working better.
Right. Okay.
And you can experiment a little bit. But I'd encourage people to experiment with those galactic center-based Ayanamshas more so than a stellar-based Ayanamsha, which I just have no respect for any stellar-based Ayanamsha.
Well,
they didn't know where the galactic center was. So they just used stars that most gave the correct position, which were Revati and Chitra.
Well, quick question. I'm curious whether we should say anything more about in this particular portion, or if we should save it for the discussion on the nakshatras specifically. So when we're looking at this, What's my question exactly? Um, Everyone wants to base nakshatras or ayanamshas on stars, right? And here we're saying, let's take it away from stars because stars are going to move, stars are going to drift, stars are going to burn out, and these sorts of things. How could we explain that in a way that might get through to people?
Let's do that in the next portion.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. So
then we'll hammer through to them.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and conclude here for our interview for today, and we'll pick up next time looking at nakshatras and Dhruva equatorial nakshatras and so on. So thanks for coming on, Ernst. It was good to see you again.